Hello. My name is Adelpha Holbrook. And 5 minutes from now, I'll be fired in front of 800 people, at a ceremony I built, inside a company I saved, by a sister who once used my passwords to pass her midterms. I brought flowers to this betrayal. White calla lilies. Just like my father used to. Because I thought loyalty meant something. Turns out, it's the first thing they throw away. I arrived earlier than I needed to, before the crowd, before the lights hummed awake, before my name was erased. The rooftop auditorium at Holbrook Dynamics had been polished to perfection, the kind of shine that made you feel disposable. I stood behind the stage curtain, bouquet of white calla lilies balanced in my arms. My father had given me the same flowers after every company milestone. He used to say they stood for loyalty, simple, clean, dependable. I suppose loyalty is what gets you killed in business families. I wasn't on the agenda, but I'd come anyway. Not to speak, just to show respect. 20 years building a company leaves a habit in your bones. I fixed my blouse in the mirrored column, smoothed a wrinkle that wasn't there, and heard the applause start. Callista's voice floated out over the microphone, bright and confident, coated in that honeyed PR charm she'd mastered from magazines and social media. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for believing in Holbrook's new era. New era. I felt the words pinch. The air smelled of fresh paint and money. Every time she spoke, the crowd leaned forward like she was reading them a bedtime story about innovation. She used to copy my reports in college, now she quoted Forbes like scripture. I stepped closer to the edge of the curtain, catching her reflection in the teleprompter glass. She was beautiful, of course she was. That's what my mother always said, a face like that deserves to lead. The audience laughed at her jokes, nodded at her promises. I stayed still, holding the flowers tighter, waiting for a moment that would never come. Then she said it. Some of us have carried too much for too long, Callista smiled, pausing for effect. And it's time to honor them by letting them rest. The screen behind her lit up with slides of organizational transformation. Under the heading Legacy Transition, my name appeared in a clean serif font, followed by the words effective immediately. For a second, the world tilted. I heard gasps, soft, polite, muffled by professionalism. My heart didn't race, it stopped, then started again, slower. A young assistant, someone I'd trained, approached me with an envelope. She couldn't meet my eyes. Miss Holbrook, they asked me to give you this. I took it. My fingers didn't tremble. Inside, one sentence, your role has concluded under the new leadership alignment. I reread the line once, then twice, until the words dissolved into meaningless shapes. I looked up just in time to see Callista thanking me from the stage. My sister's dedication has been invaluable to Holbrook's foundation. We owe her everything we've built, and now, it's my job to take us forward. Applause. Cameras clicked. My own mother stood in the front row, clapping. I didn't move. I just listened, to the rhythm of people I'd mentored cheering the person who'd just cut me out. There's a strange quiet when your world ends politely. The press Q&A began. A man from the Minneapolis Journal asked about the European expansion contract. I felt my breath pause. That was mine. 18 months of flights, negotiations, and half-sleepless nights. Callista smiled like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror. Oh, that deal? Closed 6 months ago. I led the final stage myself. No one corrected her. Byron, the board advisor who'd once promised me loyalty, looked down at his notes. I wanted him to look at me, just once. He didn't. In that moment, I realized the difference between betrayal and disappointment. Betrayal burns, disappointment freezes. I stood there, numb, watching a version of my work rewritten in real time. The applause swelled again. The lights warmed my face. Someone nearby whispered, "It's business, not personal." That phrase is the bullet everyone fires when they want to kill your soul without leaving a mark. I turned, walking toward the elevator. My heels echoed against marble like a slow metronome marking the end of something sacred. As I passed the first row, my mother reached out and touched my sleeve. "Don't make a scene," she murmured. "Smile. Cameras are still rolling." I smiled. She smiled back, relieved, as if I'd done the right thing. The elevator doors opened, cool air brushing my face. I stepped inside, still holding the lilies. The petals had started to bruise where my grip tightened. Somewhere above me, Callista's voice carried through the speakers, "Holbrook Dynamics is ready for the future." I placed the bouquet in the corner of the elevator. The motion bent one of the stems, white pollen brushed my wrist like chalk. The door slid shut, cutting off the applause mid-clap. On the ground floor, the lobby glowed with sunlight and the reflection of 30 years of my family's ambition. I designed those floors myself, the same marble that now watched me walk away. Security guards looked up but said nothing. I kept my chin high, each step steady. Outside, the July air hit like a wall. Minneapolis shimmered under heat. Traffic roared below the building's glass facade. I stopped at the curb, the reflection of the rooftop still mirrored in the skyscraper windows. From a distance, it looked like everything was fine. A notification buzzed on my phone. A news alert already quoting Callista, new CEO ushers in era of modernization. My throat tightened, but no tears came. I'd spent too many years managing crises to cry over one more. I walked to my car, the envelope still in my hand. Inside, the engine's hum was the only sound. I set the letter on the passenger seat, stared at it until the words blurred. The lilies had left a faint scent of decay on my fingers, sweet, heavy, almost kind. I whispered to no one, "You did it, Cal. You finally became the headline." The parking attendant waved as I drove out. I wondered if he knew, if anyone knew, that the woman behind the wheel had just lost the company she'd saved twice. Probably not. People see what they're told to see. At the red light, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't look ruined. Just quiet. That was the trick, destruction doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it leaves wearing perfume and lipstick. When the light turned green, I didn't move. Cars honked. I breathed once, twice, steadying the shake in my hands. The sound of horns faded beneath the thud of my pulse. I thought of my father's voice, "Don't ever beg to stay where you're not valued." He'd said it once when a client tried to undercut our prices. I never imagined it would apply to family. I pressed the gas pedal, merging into traffic. The city blurred. By the time I reached the river, the anger had settled into something colder, clarity. I knew, in that stillness, this wasn't over. Families like ours never end quietly. Back at home, I placed the lilies on the kitchen counter. They leaned, already curling at the edges. I didn't throw them away. I let them die slowly, naturally, the way trust dies when love becomes a headline. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed her smile, the room, the applause. I rewrote the script in my head, line by line, what I should have said, what I would say if given one more chance. But the truth stayed the same, they hadn't just replaced me. They had erased me. And somewhere above the city lights, Callista was still smiling for the cameras, believing the company would survive without its spine. The city lights outside my window blurred into a river of gold, and somewhere between one breath and the next, I realized I couldn't stay in that apartment another minute. Silence had never felt so loud. So I drove, past the downtown towers, through the long, quiet streets of Edina, toward the house that still carried my childhood inside its walls. By the time I parked in front, twilight had settled over the neighborhood. The porch light was already on. Mom always turned it on early, as if expecting someone. Maybe, in her mind, she still was. The door opened before I knocked. "Adelpha," she said, her voice even, her smile careful. "I figured you'd come by." The kitchen looked the same. The same yellow curtains, the same hum from the old refrigerator, the same cinnamon candle half burned on the counter. Nothing aged here except the people. I stood at the doorway, remembering the sound of my father's laugh echoing off these walls. He used to call me his anchor. Now, no one called me anything. Mom moved like a woman rehearsing a familiar scene, 2 cups, 2 saucers, no eye contact. "Tea?" she asked, already pouring. "Sure," I said, sitting down. My hands rested on the table that still had the faint scratch from when I carved my initials at 10. I traced the groove quietly, wondering if she ever noticed it all these years. We sat there, steam rising between us. She studied me like a stranger you meet on a plane, interested, but detached. "You always did better when no one was watching," she said, finally. "You're not built for the spotlight like Callista." The words landed softly, but their edges were sharp. I didn't flinch, didn't argue. I just wrapped both hands around the cup to keep them steady. Mom went on, her tone gentle, almost apologetic. "Callista has a gift for connecting with people. You've always been more operational. The backbone, yes, but people don't notice the backbone." "I noticed," I said, my voice even. Every night for 20 years. She sighed as if I'd missed the point. Don't be dramatic. It's business. Families can't survive without someone moving forward. There it was again, the family as an excuse for betrayal. I let her talk, the same way I used to let clients vent before closing a deal. Then she slid a folder across the table. I spoke with the board. There's an opening at the Duluth branch. Regional Operations Manager. Smaller team, easier pace. You'd still have a title. It's better than nothing, isn't it? I stared at the folder like it was a condolence card. Mom, I said slowly, you realize this means stepping down 6 levels. She smiled tightly. It's not about levels. It's about peace. You've been through enough stress. Peace. That word again. The same word people used when they wanted me quiet. I leaned back, exhaling softly. You mean I've been through enough visibility? Her eyes flicked up. Don't twist my words. I don't have to. They're straight enough. The air between us thickened. Cicadas sang outside the window, the sound stretching the silence. Callista's doing what's best for the company, she said, standing to refill her tea. She's just modernizing things. Your father would have understood. He'd have understood integrity, I said quietly. The rest he'd have fired. She turned, startled by the edge in my voice. You've changed, she said. I had to. Staying the same didn't work. Before she could respond, the house phone rang. She answered, tone brightening instantly. Hi, sweetheart, yes, she's here. She looked at me, covering the receiver. It's Callista. She wants to say hello. I shook my head. I'm fine. Mom ignored me, pressing speakerphone. We were just having tea. Callista's voice spilled through, sugary and confident. Hey, Del. Mom told me you were offered the Duluth post. Did you accept yet? I could hear the smile in her tone, like she was talking to an employee, not a sister. I haven't decided, I said. Oh, come on. It's a great fit. Less pressure, more your style. You've always been amazing behind the scenes. There it was, the same tone she used at the podium when thanking me for 20 years of service. That polished, patronizing gratitude people use when they're certain they've won. Mom laughed softly, the kind of laugh that makes allies out of strangers. She's just being cautious, she told Callista. Well, tell her to stop overthinking. It's time to move on, Callista said. The company's doing fine, but we need harmony. No hard feelings, right? Harmony. Another word for silence. I stood, carried my teacup to the sink, and rinsed it under running water. The clink of porcelain sounded louder than her voice through the phone. Del, she asked, noticing the quiet. I dried the cup, set it on the rack. You'll do fine, Callista, I said softly. You've always done fine. See? That's the spirit. The line clicked off with her laughter. Mom placed the receiver down, relief crossing her face. I'm glad you two can still talk. I turned to her. We didn't talk. She performed. You applauded. Her lips parted, but no defense came. She looked older suddenly, smaller in her cardigan and certainty. I walked out of the kitchen before she could say anything else. Upstairs, the air smelled like furniture polish and old summers. My childhood room had been turned into a guest space, neutral walls, beige sheets, a vase of fake flowers on the dresser. Only the trophies on the shelf remained, their gold peeling slightly, my name engraved beneath, Regional Science Fair winner, 1998. The last time someone thought I was exceptional. I sat on the bed, opened my suitcase. Inside were the things I hadn't unpacked since leaving the office, laptop, charger, a few files I couldn't bring myself to shred. The folder from Duluth sat on top. I pushed it aside and powered up the laptop. The glow filled the dim room, reflecting off those childhood trophies like silent witnesses. I opened my email, scrolled through messages. Contracts, board memos, legal drafts, all forwarded, all reassigned. My name missing from the loops I'd built. The silence of digital deletion. Then I saw a file I'd kept offline, a personal archive of early projects, old budgets, employee rosters. Something tugged inside me. Every contract, every document carried my fingerprints. They could pretend otherwise, but systems don't forget. I searched through subfolders until I found it, a scanned copy of my first major contract. My signature beside my father's. The same handwriting Callista tried to mimic when she forged his approval years later. For a moment, The ache in my chest sharpened, but then steadied. I remembered his voice. You don't fight family with noise. You fight them with facts. I closed the file, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. The cicadas were still singing outside. The rhythm reminded me of all the nights I'd stayed late in the office, the hum of machines keeping me company. Quiet, constant, loyal. I won't disappear this quietly, I whispered. The words felt different spoken aloud, less like a promise, more like a plan. I folded the Duluth folder, slipped it into the bottom drawer, and shut it with finality. Downstairs, the house creaked, old wood shifting like it was listening. I almost smiled. I'd been erased once. I wouldn't let it happen again. I didn't wait until morning. The guest room still smelled like furniture polish and old carpet. I'd slept restlessly, if you could call it sleep. Mostly, I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the rhythm of blades slicing still air, feeling the throb in my chest that wouldn't quite settle. By 6 a.m., I was dressed. Slacks, blouse, blazer. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that said revenge. Just clothes I used to wear when I belonged somewhere. The car ride downtown was quiet. The radio stayed off. My hands gripped the wheel just tight enough to keep from shaking. I didn't expect the badge to work, but it did. As I passed through the security gates at Holbrook Dynamics, I caught a glimpse of myself in the elevator doors. Same posture. Same eyes. But something behind the reflection was missing. I stepped inside. The ride to the 14th floor felt longer than I remembered. At every stop, no one got on. I stared at the numbers blinking upward, one floor at a time, counting seconds by the beat of my breath. When the doors opened, the hallway was silent. The lights were too bright, fluorescent, cold. I walked past the office that used to be mine. The nameplate was gone. In its place, a blank wall. It didn't matter how many late nights I'd stayed behind that door. All that remained was the absence. No one said good morning. A few employees glanced up from their desks. Most didn't meet my eyes. One man, Ryan, from finance, pretended to check his watch and ducked into the break room. I kept walking. I headed for the archive room. It was tucked at the end of the corridor, past the legal team's offices, just before the server closet. Inside, it smelled of dust and climate control. I sat down at the only working terminal. Entered my credentials. The screen blinked. Access denied. I tried again. Same result. I moved to the next terminal, pulling up the internal directory. My name was no longer listed under operations. In fact, it wasn't listed at all. Not Adelpha Holbrook, former COO. Not legacy consultant. Just nothing. Even the temp employee who'd started last week had a profile. I clicked through emails, the ones I'd sent, the ones I'd archived, the drafts I'd saved like old confessions. Every folder was empty. Even the color-coded labels I'd built into the system, blue for legal, green for Europe, red for contracts, they were gone. Every file. Every document. Every word I had written into this company had been wiped. Not transferred. Not archived. Wiped. I sat back in the chair, hands resting on the edge of the desk. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. Not like a cut. More like a leak. Something slow and constant, the kind of damage you don't see until the house floods. I opened the desk drawer, out of habit. Empty. I stared at the screen again. The cursor blinked, waiting. Eventually, I stood up. My heels clicked softly on the linoleum as I made my way down the hall, past the familiar posters on the wall. Innovation begins with belief. People over process. Corporate poetry for a company that had just erased its founder's daughter without a trace. The boardroom door was ajar. I paused outside. Inside, I saw them. Callista at the head of the table, hair sleek, voice smooth. Byron to her right, nodding as if nothing had changed. Half the board was there. A few of them laughed at something she said. I had stood in that same room, in that same chair, for 15 years. Led emergency meetings. Closed impossible deals. Now, I couldn't even enter. Someone saw me. A woman I didn't recognize, Callista's assistant, maybe, stood up, walked to the door, and gently shut it in my face. No words. Just a click. I didn't knock. I didn't cry. I turned around and walked away. Down the stairwell, my footsteps echoing against concrete, each level sounding heavier than the last. When I reached the parking garage, I opened the trunk of my car. There, in the side compartment, was a small, unmarked USB drive. I kept it hidden. Just in case. A just in case I hoped would never come. I held it in my palm, feeling the weight that wasn't really weight, just meaning. They deleted me from the server. But not from the work. Inside that drive were contracts, signatures, revisions, drafts. Proof of what I'd built. Proof of who I was. Quietly, slowly, gently, I drove home. The city passed me by, buildings reflecting morning light like nothing had changed. I parked in the driveway, stepped into the kitchen, and placed the USB on the table like it was sacred. I opened my laptop. It took a few seconds to load, the fan humming. Folder after folder unfolded. Legal. Financial. International. I clicked into the largest one, BNK Europe. There it was. The clause I'd insisted on. The clause they'd called paranoid. The clause Callista probably hadn't even read. Section 14.3, if Adelpha Holbrook ceases to serve Holbrook Dynamics in any capacity, this agreement is nullified immediately. I stared at the words, not with anger, but with something deeper. A knowing. They'd erased me from the digital world. But I'd left my name in the lines they forgot to check. The cursor blinked on the screen, small and steady, like it knew what I was about to do. I sat there, in the dim corner of my home office, the glow of the desk lamp spilling across the contract. The house was silent except for the slow hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the faint tick of the wall clock. It was late enough that even the neighbors' lights had gone out. I scrolled back to the top of the document, bnk_master.docs, my name printed neatly in the header. The contract looked clinical, full of corporate phrasing that no one bothered to read anymore. I moved my cursor to section 14.3, the contributor clause, and read it one more time. If Ms. Adelpha Holbrook ceases to serve Holbrook Dynamics in any capacity, the agreement becomes void. A small laugh slipped out, quiet but real. They had called me paranoid for adding it. Callista especially. No one's going to remove you, Del, she had said at the time, smiling like it was absurd. You act like you're irreplaceable. She was wrong about so many things. I leaned back in my chair, fingers resting gently on the keyboard. The weight in my chest shifted from heaviness to something sharper, certainty. All these years, I'd let them call me cautious, controlling, resistant to change. The truth was simpler, I just knew how fragile people became when power touched their hands. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. I reached for my pen, not to write but to hold something solid. My hand shook slightly as memory started to rise, voices, a boardroom, a long table, 10 years earlier. The smell of burnt coffee filled the room back then. Byron had been there, sleeves rolled up, voice even but tired. This clause makes the board nervous, he told me, trying to sound reasonable. You're basically saying the entire contract hinges on you personally. I remember smiling, soft but unwavering. I'm saying that what we built hinges on the people who built it. He'd looked at me for a long moment. You're protecting yourself. No, I said, tapping the paper gently. I'm protecting the company from what happens when it forgets who saved it. Callista had been in that room too. She was still on the marketing side then, new suit, new perfume, always new. She leaned forward and said, You really think the client cares who signs the check? It's the brand they trust, not your name. She laughed after that, light and dismissive, as if I'd made a joke. The rest of the board followed her lead. I didn't respond. I just waited until they quieted down and slid the paper back across the table. Then you won't mind signing it, I'd said. The pen hovered over the document for a long time before Byron finally nodded. The vote passed. I remember my signature next to my father's. He had still been alive then, proud but silent, always letting me fight my own battles. The memory faded as the glow of the laptop pulled me back to the present. The same clause that once made them uncomfortable was now the line that could break them. The irony wasn't lost on me. I took a slow breath, the kind that steadies you without meaning to. I saved the file to the desktop and opened another folder, one I hadn't touched in years, voice_recordings. There were only 3 files inside. The second one was labeled voice_02.m4a. For a few seconds, I just stared at it. My mother's handwriting flashed through my mind, tiny loops, perfect spacing. She'd been meticulous in everything, even in love. After her death, Byron had handed me her old laptop. I'd gone through it once, quickly, unable to bear it. But tonight, something told me to open that file. I clicked play. The first sound was static, soft and uneven. Then her voice, faint but unmistakable. Testing. Yes, it's on. She laughed quietly. I never understood these machines. Then her tone changed. Callista was always meant for the front row, she said, voice trembling just slightly. She shines better there. Cameras love her. But Adelpha? She's the one holding the whole thing up. The spine. The structure. They'll only realize it when she's gone. The audio crackled. I froze, one hand pressed over my mouth. I worry about them, she continued. The board, Byron, even Callista. They don't see how much she's carried. If she ever stops, if she ever walks away, it all falls apart. And they'll deserve what follows. The file ended abruptly. Silence took over the room. I sat there for a long while, the sound of her voice still vibrating through me. My throat burned. Not from tears, I was past crying, but from the weight of being seen when it no longer mattered. Gently, I whispered to the empty air, you knew, didn't you, Mom? I replayed the recording once, not for proof but for peace. The tone in her voice wasn't flattery, it was clarity. She'd understood the difference between being visible and being essential. Slowly, I renamed the file. Foundation_proof.m4a. The screen felt brighter now. The house didn't feel as heavy. I opened my email, attached the BNK contract, and addressed it to my lawyer, subject line, activate only if approached. No details. No explanation. Just readiness. I didn't plan revenge. I planned remembrance. There's a difference. Revenge wants witnesses. Remembrance just wants truth to exist, even quietly. Leaning back, I let my eyes close for a moment. I could almost hear the old boardroom again, the rhythm of voices, the rustle of papers, the way my father cleared his throat before signing. I could hear Callista's laughter echoing in the background, carefree, certain she would always be protected. They'd built everything on my steadiness. And now, without realizing it, they'd built their collapse into my name. When I opened my eyes again, the clock read 1:12 a.m. The house was still. The laptop fan hummed softly. I took a deep breath and whispered to the dark, this isn't for them. It's for me. The words felt warm in my chest, like a slow ember catching light. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. I saved the file, shut the lid, and let the room fall back into quiet. Somewhere beyond these walls, the company that had discarded me still glowed across billboards, still flashed in ads, still carried my fingerprints. They didn't know it yet, but the foundation beneath their empire had just shifted. Morning arrived gray and restless. The air carried that faint metallic chill of early autumn, the kind that whispered of endings even when nothing had yet begun. I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee growing cold, the contract still open on my laptop. Section 14.3 stared back at me like a quiet witness, but today wasn't about legal language. Today was about what came next. The television was on, volume low. I didn't plan to watch, but when Callista's face appeared on the morning business channel, I couldn't look away. The banner read, New CEO leads Holbrook into the future. Her voice filled the room, polished, pleasant, designed for sound bites. We're not just updating our systems, she said. We're redefining relevance. Holbrook is evolving. I muted the sound, but the captions still crawled across the screen, legacy division restructured, innovative leadership, modernization strategy. A reporter asked something that made Callista laugh, an easy, photogenic laugh that used to charm our investors. How are you building upon your sister's legacy, he asked. She tilted her head, smiling. Adelpha was loyal, yes, but sometimes the past slows you down. The sentence landed harder than I expected. It wasn't cruel on its surface, but it was a scalpel, clean, precise, meant to cut without leaving blood. I reached for my glass of water. My fingers tightened around it until condensation slicked my palm. In the background of the broadcast, Byron appeared for a moment, standing near the stage. He didn't speak. He just looked away from the cameras. Mom must have been watching too, probably sitting in her living room, nodding in approval. I could almost hear her voice, she's just saying what needs to be said, dear. Don't take it personally. But everything about it was personal. The screen cut to a highlight reel of the event, smiling employees, handshake photos, Callista posing beneath the Holbrook banner I had designed 10 years ago. The tagline under her image read, "A new vision for a new era." I shut off the TV. The silence that followed was too heavy. Then my phone buzzed. An email from my lawyer, subject line, "You should see this immediately." Attached was a PDF, scanned legal paperwork. My stomach tightened as I scrolled. It was a temporary proxy transfer of my voting shares. The signature at the bottom was my mother's. Dated 3 days before my termination. I stared at the screen, reading the line again and again. Familial trust exception, Holbrook Holdings. I called my attorney immediately. He picked up on the second ring. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is," I said. He hesitated. "I'm afraid it is. Your mother executed a temporary transfer under the trust clause your father drafted years ago. It's technically legal, but it bypasses your consent. Byron likely advised her it was for stability." "Stability," I repeated quietly. "That's the word people use when they're stealing from you politely." He sighed. "It's messy, Adelpha. But reversible, if you can prove fraud or coercion. Right now, though, they control your shares." I thanked him and hung up before my voice cracked. The betrayal didn't sting, it settled. Like dust on an old photograph. It had been building for years, I just hadn't noticed how thick the layer had grown. I walked to the bookshelf in my office and pulled down a leather folder, one my father had signed before his death. Inside were older contracts, amendments, clauses written in his careful penmanship. There it was, the veto override clause. He had trusted me enough to include it, a safeguard buried in legal jargon, accessible only if fraud was suspected in share movement. I pressed my hand against the page, tracing his signature. He always believed in preventative measures, not drama. "I get it now, Dad," I murmured softly. "You knew they'd try something like this." For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the quiet steady me. The house smelled faintly of cedar and paper. Outside, the wind brushed the maple tree against the window, rhythmic, grounding. When I opened my eyes, the anger felt sharper, but cleaner. They'd called me obsolete. They'd called me old-fashioned. But the systems that protected Holbrook, the very ones keeping it from collapse, were mine. And they were still in place. I turned on my phone, scrolled to Byron's contact, and hit call. It went straight to voicemail. His recorded voice was calm, rehearsed. When the beep sounded, I spoke evenly. "You looked away last time," I said. "If you do it again, you're complicit." No threats. Just truth. I ended the call. By mid-afternoon, another email arrived. This time from a journalist I knew slightly, a woman named Jenna from Twin Cities Business. Subject line, "Need a quote." The message was short. "Adelpha, rumor says your sister's press conference downplayed your role in the European expansion deal. Care to comment?" I didn't reply. Not yet. I wasn't going to fight her with headlines. That was her arena. Mine was paper, proof, and precision. I poured another cup of coffee, black and cooling quickly. The bitterness steadied me. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail from my mother. "Sweetheart," she began, her tone sugary, practiced. "I know this looks bad, but it's only temporary. Callista needed time to stabilize things. You understand, don't you? She's your sister." I could hear Callista's voice faintly in the background, laughing, casual, confident. I pressed delete before it finished. Families like ours didn't apologize, they rationalized. Evening crept in quietly. The sky outside the kitchen window turned the color of old copper. I sat at the table, laptop open again, reviewing the trust documents line by line. That's when I found something new, an email chain buried in legal attachments. Byron's name appeared there, copied on every exchange. The subject, transfer authorization approved, Holbrook legacy realignment. Legacy realignment. The phrase made my skin crawl. It wasn't just about ownership. It was about rewriting history, one clause at a time. I closed the laptop and stared at my reflection in the black screen. The lines near my eyes looked deeper in this light. Not from age, from exhaustion, from holding everything together for too long. Quietly, almost tenderly, I said to my reflection, "They think they've cleaned the slate. They've forgotten I built the table they're sitting at." I stood, walked to the filing cabinet, and slid the old contract with my father's signature into a new folder labeled Veto Authority. The click of the drawer closing sounded final, like the end of a prayer. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel erased. I felt anchored. Some truths don't need witnesses to exist. They just need time to surface. And I could wait. The wind shifted outside, colder now, rattling the window pane softly. I smiled faintly, the kind that holds both sadness and certainty. Tomorrow, they would wake up still believing in their illusion of control. And I would wake up knowing the foundation beneath them was already cracking. Monday arrived without warning. The gray light filtering through my blinds looked no different from any other day, but the air carried a kind of anticipation, the stillness that comes before something breaks. I made coffee, poured it into a mug, and sat by the window, watching the steam rise like smoke. It was barely 7 when my phone buzzed. The sender's name made my heart pause for a second, Byron. The subject line read, Urgent, BNK terminating with clause 14.3, key contributor withdrawal. I opened the email slowly, reading each line twice. BNK, Holbrook's largest international client, had invoked the very clause that protected me years ago. They were pulling out of a contract worth hundreds of millions. My breath came steady, deliberate. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel revenge. Just balance, the kind that comes when truth finally surfaces. I whispered to the quiet kitchen, they thought I was replaceable. Turns out, I was the lock on the vault. Outside, traffic began to hum. Somewhere downtown, Callista was likely sitting in a boardroom trying to figure out why the empire she'd painted gold was suddenly bleeding. I didn't rush to call Byron back. I let him sit in that silence. By 10, my phone rang again, his number flashing. I answered, voice calm. Adelpha, he started, breath quick, BNK's legal team just called. They're terminating unless you're reinstated. I could almost hear the chaos behind him, papers shuffling, muted voices arguing. They want to meet, he continued. With you. Not Callista. Not the board. You. I said nothing. Are you coming in? He asked, desperate now. I'll think about it. And I hung up. The truth was, I had already decided. I wouldn't go back to beg. I would go back to be seen. By the time I reached Holbrook's downtown tower, the glass exterior reflected clouds rolling across the sky. I parked underground, walked through the same marble lobby that had once felt like home. My heels clicked on the floor, sharp, measured, unhurried. Employees stared. Some whispered. Others looked away. When I entered the boardroom, the air felt different, thick with panic and perfume. Callista sat at the head of the table, the same seat I'd once occupied. Her hair was perfectly styled, her lipstick perfect, but the illusion had cracks. She looked up when I walked in, eyes widening just slightly. You're not supposed to be here, she said. Neither is the contract you just lost, I replied. Byron cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. They're insisting on a meeting with Adelpha. Patricia Walsh, BNK's global operations head, specifically named her. The room went still. Callista's smile faltered. They can't do that. I'm the CEO now. They can, Byron said quietly. And they did. I placed a printed copy of the BNK contract on the table, open to section 14.3. You might want to read this again, I said. It's the clause you called unnecessary. No one spoke. I didn't sit. I didn't stay. I turned and walked out, leaving the sound of my name hanging in the air behind me like a ghost refusing to disappear. Outside, the autumn rain had begun. I drove to a cafe downtown, one that smelled of roasted beans and damp coats. The kind of place where people went to negotiate quietly. Patricia Walsh was already there, seated in the corner booth. She was older than I remembered, sharp eyes, calm posture, a woman who had seen too many deals fall apart and too many men take credit for what women built. She smiled as I approached. Adelpha Holbrook, she said, standing to shake my hand. You look peaceful. I've had time to think, I replied. We sat. She stirred her coffee, then looked at me with an expression that was both kind and direct. Your sister has branding, she said plainly. But you have structure. We invest in what lasts. I didn't flinch. You're pulling out, then? She nodded. Unless you're in. For a moment, the rain filled the silence between us. The sound was steady, almost soothing. Patricia slid a folder across the table. This is a proposal. A partnership, not employment. We want you to lead an independent branch under BNK, no Holbrook involvement. You'd have control. I opened the folder. Numbers, projections, potential growth. It wasn't just an offer, it was validation printed in ink. Still, I closed it slowly, fingers resting on the edge. Let's not rush, I said. I want to build something that won't forget who held it up. She smiled. That's exactly why we came to you. We spoke for another hour, outlining possibilities, ethical partnerships, transparent leadership, systems designed to honor work instead of erasing it. It wasn't revenge I felt rising inside me. It was relief, a quiet sense that maybe this time, the story would be written honestly. When we finished, she stood and placed her hand on mine. You deserved better, Adelpha. Everyone in this industry knows that. Then why didn't anyone say it sooner? I asked gently. She sighed. People protect what they think will survive. Now they see that what survives is you. After she left, I sat for a long while watching rain trace lines down the window. Each drop blurred the city lights until everything shimmered. I realized I didn't hate them, not my mother, not even Callista. Hate would have meant I still needed something from them. The only thing I wanted now was distance. When I finally stepped outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. The air smelled clean. I walked to my car, sliding behind the wheel. My phone buzzed again, another email from Byron, this time shorter. Board demands immediate meeting. Callista insists you attend. I smiled faintly and turned the phone face down. Some lessons have to come the hard way. Driving through the city, I passed a Holbrook billboard, Callista's face staring down, smiling, perfect, untouchable. But beneath her photo, a new banner had been placed, contract suspended pending review. The sight didn't thrill me. It just felt inevitable. At a red light, I reached over and opened Patricia's folder again. The papers rustled softly. The chance to rebuild was there, waiting, clean, untainted by family politics. A small voice inside me whispered, "Don't rush. Build it right this time." The light turned green. I didn't accelerate right away. I sat there, watching the rain bead on the windshield, thinking how strange it was that sometimes justice didn't shout, it just arrived, quietly, in the shape of opportunity. I drove home slowly, letting the quiet settle in. The roads gleamed under the streetlights. My reflection in the window looked older, steadier, finally free. They had called me obsolete. But the market, the world that measures value not by charm but by consistency, had just disagreed. The storm came back that night. Rain drummed against the windows, softer than thunder but steady enough to feel like a pulse. I sat at my desk, Patricia's folder still open beside my laptop. Her offer waited there, clean and promising, untouched. I hadn't signed anything yet. Maybe I was afraid that putting my name on a new beginning meant closing the door on everything that came before it. The house was quiet except for the hum of the heater. I had left my phone face down on the table hours ago. When it started vibrating, I almost didn't look. But the glow of the screen caught my attention, her name. Callista. For a few seconds, I just watched it flash. The phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, I picked it up. I didn't say hello. All I heard was breathing, broken, ragged, desperate. Then her voice, thin and wet with tears. "Please, Adelpha. Please pick up. I don't know who else to call." "I already did," I said quietly. "You called." A sob cracked through the line. "I didn't know it would break this fast," she whispered. "BNK, Hartman, everyone's pulling out. Byron's blaming me, the board's furious. I'm drowning, okay? I don't know how to fix this." The same words she'd used years ago when she ruined our first partnership with bad numbers. Back then, I had fixed it. Back then, I'd believed her. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, leaning back in my chair. "You didn't know," I said slowly, "or you didn't care?" She sniffed hard. "I was trying to save the company." "No," I said. "You were trying to save your image." Silence stretched between us, brittle as glass. "You can come back," she blurted out suddenly. "Please. The board will listen to you. You can still fix this." "Fix what?" I asked softly. "The company, or your conscience?" "I'm begging you," she said. "If we lose BNK, it's over. You built those systems, those contracts, no one else understands them. You can save us." I stood, walking to the window. Rain streaked down the glass, distorting the streetlights. My reflection looked pale, unfamiliar. "That's the difference between us," I said finally. "When things fell apart, I stayed and worked until they didn't. You waited until someone else could fix it for you. Don't do this, she cried. You're punishing me. No, I whispered. I'm remembering. She didn't reply. I could hear her breathing, shallow and uneven. I almost felt sorry for her, the same way you feel sorry for a child who's broken a toy they were warned not to touch. Adelpha, she said, voice trembling, you're my sister. I closed my eyes. That used to mean something. Her sobs grew louder. Please. Just tell me what to do. You'll figure it out, I said, ending the call. The phone felt heavier once the silence returned. I set it face down again, the same way I'd found it. For a moment, the only sound was rain. The quiet wasn't peace, it was aftermath. I went to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and stood under the faint light above the sink. The world outside smelled of wet earth and endings. When I returned to my desk, a new notification blinked in the corner of the screen. Unread email. From Veda Quinn. Subject, I owe you an apology. I hesitated before opening it. Ms. Holbrook, it began, I've been thinking about everything that happened. I'm sorry for staying silent. You didn't deserve what they did. You were the real lead, the reason any of it worked. I was scared. I shouldn't have been. I scrolled further. There's a video attached. From a closed board meeting last month. I copied it before IT scrubbed it from the archive. You should see it. My mouse hovered over the file, board_confidential.mov. The video opened to a conference room I knew by heart. Callista sat at the head of the table, laughing. One of the new executives said, "Do you think she'll make a fuss about being let go?" Callista smiled that same perfect smile. Adelpha? No. She's old school. She'll fade quietly, like the rest of the legacy people. That's why it's so easy. The table erupted in soft laughter. Then Callista leaned closer to the camera, unaware it was still recording. It's time to phase out the dead weight. Holbrook doesn't need sentimentality. It needs sparkle. I didn't pause it. I didn't cry. I just watched until the video ended and the screen turned black. Gently, I renamed the file Truth, Unreleased, and moved it to the same folder where my mother's recording lived. For a moment, I looked at both titles side by side, Foundation_Proof and Truth, Unreleased. One spoke of who I was. The other, of who they'd become. I sat back in my chair and breathed slowly. There was no satisfaction, no triumph, just stillness. I realized then that revenge wasn't what I wanted. It was understanding. The kind that comes too late to fix anything but right on time to free you. I closed the laptop and let my hands rest in my lap. The air felt heavier, like the rain outside had seeped through the walls. Somewhere deep in the house, the heater clicked on again, a quiet reminder that life went on, even in ruins. My phone buzzed once more, a text from an unknown number. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. I already knew who it was. I walked to the living room, turning off the lights as I went. The dark was comforting. I sat by the window, watching the last drops slide down the glass, catching the faint reflection of my own face. For years, I had been everyone's rescue plan, the fixer, the steady one, the silent safety net they assumed would always catch them. Now, as the rain faded into a hush, I realized I didn't owe them that anymore. I whispered to the quiet room, I'm not here to rescue you. I'm here to remember I didn't deserve to drown. The words hung in the air, softer than grief but heavier than forgiveness. Outside, the clouds began to break. A faint silver light touched the edges of the street, gentle and unhurried. I sat there for a long time, breathing it in, feeling something shift deep inside, a quiet power I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken either. Just free. The morning of the conference arrived cold and bright, the kind of day that made the air sharp in your lungs and every reflection in glass look unforgivingly clear. I woke before my alarm, the world still wrapped in quiet. The rain had washed everything clean. My invitation lay on the counter beside the coffee maker, a single white card embossed with silver, National Tech and Leadership Conference, honoring the architects of innovation. 10 years ago, they wouldn't have called me an architect. They would have called me reliable, consistent, words that sound like praise until you realize they're used to describe furniture. I got dressed slowly. Not in a power suit or anything meant to impress. Just a soft gray jacket that had belonged to my father. He'd worn it to the first Holbrook contract signing. The fabric still held the faint scent of cedar and ink. When I arrived at the convention center, the parking lot was already full. Banners rippled in the November wind, printed with faces of speakers and sponsors. Mine wasn't among them. That felt right somehow. Some stories are stronger when they're not advertised. Inside, the air buzzed with chatter and perfume. I could hear the hum of microphones, the soft shuffle of papers, the occasional nervous laugh of people pretending not to care about being noticed. Patricia Walsh found me backstage, a sleek folder in her hand and a look that mixed pride with relief. "You ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," I said. She smiled. "Remember, this isn't about redemption. It's recognition. The industry already knows what you did, they're just waiting to hear you say it." Her words landed softly, like reassurance wrapped in truth. When she stepped onto the stage to introduce me, the applause rose and settled like a wave, steady, respectful, not explosive. "Today," Patricia said into the microphone, "we celebrate a woman whose name was nearly erased, but whose work could never be forgotten." I walked out under the lights. The stage was wide, the audience larger than I had imagined. I didn't rush. The air felt solid beneath my feet, like each step was staking claim to ground I'd once lost. I reached the podium and waited for the applause to fade. My heartbeat slowed into rhythm with the lights above. "Legacy isn't something you pose for," I began. "It's something you build when no one's looking." The words came easily. I didn't read from notes, I didn't need to. I spoke of the quiet work, the nights spent debugging systems, rewriting contracts, negotiating deals that saved the company not once, but twice. I told them how progress without integrity is just vanity in motion. "My sister once said the past slows us down," I said. "But the truth is, without roots, nothing grows." The audience listened. Not a cough, not a shuffle. They weren't clapping, they were absorbing. "I used to think visibility was the reward," I said softly. "But now I know, visibility without value is just light hitting an empty wall." My voice didn't tremble. My hands didn't shake. For 20 years, I'd been trained to steady the table while everyone else spoke. Now, I realized I didn't need the table at all. I'd built the floor beneath it. When I finished, the applause didn't erupt, it built, slow and certain, like rain turning to storm. People stood. Some clapped with both hands, others with that quiet, reverent rhythm reserved for things they wish they'd seen sooner. Patricia joined me on stage, whispering, "You did it." I smiled gently. I just told the truth. After the session, people crowded near the stage, executives, reporters, former colleagues. Some wanted handshakes, others offered apologies disguised as admiration. Byron was among them, standing off to the side, his face unreadable. Our eyes met for a second. He nodded once, not in guilt, but acknowledgement. That was enough. I slipped through the crowd and stepped outside, into the cold air. Snow had begun to fall, light and slow. I breathed it in. That's when I saw her, the woman in the navy coat waiting by the exit. She looked familiar, though I couldn't place her. "Miss Holbrook," she asked, extending a gloved hand. "My name's Elaine Porter. I work with B&K's venture division." She handed me a small card embossed with her name and the B&K logo. "We're building something new," she said. "An innovation firm. We need someone who understands both structure and soul. We want you to lead it." I blinked. "You don't even know if I'd say yes." She smiled. "We know enough. The offer includes full creative control and equity stake. You'd answer only to the board you build." For a long moment, I didn't answer. The wind picked up, scattering a few flakes across my coat sleeve. I thought of the years spent begging for permission to lead, the rooms where my voice was borrowed and my credit erased. Finally, I said, "If I do this, it won't carry my name. It'll carry my values." "That's exactly why we're asking you," she said. We shook hands, firm and simple. When she left, I slipped the card into my pocket but didn't look at it again. The snow deepened on the walk back to my car. Each step felt lighter. I wasn't leaving something behind, I was walking toward something that belonged to me. Across town, in the tower that once bore my name, another meeting was falling apart. Reports would later say the systems crashed, the workflows halted, and no one could trace how the infrastructure had been held together. In the office that used to be mine, a temp CEO sat stiffly in my old chair. He clicked through reports, frustrated. "None of this makes sense," he muttered. An engineer standing nearby said quietly, "She designed the architecture. We just operated it." Later that afternoon, someone found a small bronze plaque hidden beneath the desk, one that hadn't been there before. It read, "This space was held by someone who never needed to be seen to hold everything. No one claimed to have placed it there." Back at home, I stood by the window watching the snow thicken. The city blurred under white. My reflection overlapped with the skyline, two worlds, one past and one waiting. I poured tea, the warmth curling through my fingers, and allowed myself to breathe. The applause still echoed faintly in my ears, but softer now, like a memory you don't need to replay to believe it happened. I didn't call anyone. Not my mother, not Byron, not even Patricia. I didn't need to. When you finally stand where you belong, explanation feels like noise. Quietly, slowly, gently, I smiled. The lake outside my window shimmered under a thin layer of morning frost. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that carries its own heartbeat. I stood at the center of my new office, surrounded by unopened boxes and the smell of new paint. The space was smaller than any I'd worked in before, but the sunlight reached every corner. It didn't need grandeur, it needed peace. I set down the last box on the oak desk by the window. There was no nameplate waiting for me this time. Just a framed photograph of my father and me at Holbrook's first annual dinner, both of us laughing, unaware of the weight those smiles would later carry. For the first time in years, I felt like I didn't have to brace myself before sitting down at a desk. I opened one of the drawers, empty except for a smooth grain of polished wood. From my purse, I took the small USB drive that had carried the proof, the contract, and every truth they had tried to bury. I laid it gently inside the drawer and slid it closed without locking it. Some things didn't need protection anymore. The heater clicked softly in the corner, humming like a lullaby for a space still learning its own rhythm. I exhaled slowly, the air warming against the glass as I leaned forward to look at the lake. For so long, every morning had started with a battle, emails, meetings, strategies designed to prove worth. Now, my only task was remembering who I had been before all that noise. On my screen, an old draft email sat in the outbox. I'd written it weeks ago but never sent it. The subject line read, "Closure." I opened it, reading the words as if someone else had written them. "You taught me what being invisible felt like. Thank you. It taught me never to be invisible to myself again." I hovered over send for a moment, then smiled faintly and hit delete. The screen dimmed to black, reflecting my face back at me. Calm. Present. Whole. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened quietly, one decision at a time. I poured myself a cup of tea, the steam curling upward like a prayer, and sat by the window as snow began to fall outside. Somewhere across town, I imagined Callista waking up to another rejection email. The story cut to her without effort, like the way memory intrudes when you least expect it. A small cafe downtown, its windows fogged by the cold. She sat alone at a corner table, scrolling through her phone, face half hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Her manicured nails tapped the screen impatiently. Another message popped up, "We've decided to move forward with another candidate." She read it twice, expression blank. For a moment, she reached for her coffee, but her hand trembled slightly, spilling a small line of liquid onto the table. The waitress approached, a young woman, kind-eyed, holding a towel. "You okay, ma'am?" she asked. Callista forced a smile. "I'm fine." The waitress hesitated, tilting her head. "Sorry, you look familiar. Are you someone famous?" Callista paused, a flicker of something crossing her face, regret, pride, loss, all tangled together. "Not anymore," she said softly. The waitress smiled politely and walked away. Outside, people hurried past the window, coats pulled tight against the cold. None of them looked in. When Callista stood to leave, she left a few bills under the saucer and slipped her sunglasses back on. No one noticed her go. The bell above the door chimed once, then stopped. I didn't see it happen, but I didn't need to. Life has a way of closing circles even when you stop watching. Back in my office, the afternoon light stretched long across the floor. I'd brought a small green plant, a gift from Patricia. It was already wilting, leaves heavy from the move. I poured a little water into the soil, watching it darken slowly. "You'll come back," I murmured softly, touching one leaf. "Just need time." The words felt like they belonged to more than the plant. I moved to the blinds, pulling them open. Sunlight spilled across the room, golden and forgiving. It filled the air, painting the wood and paper in warmth. On my bookshelf, a few titles stood neatly in a row, nothing about business or leadership, just novels and journals. Between them, a single small plaque rested against the wall, engraved simply, "Integrity outlasts everything." I hadn't ordered it. Patricia must have. But it fit. I sat at the desk again, fingers tracing the smooth edge of the drawer where the USB rested. The light caught the corner of the photo of my father, illuminating his eyes until it almost looked like he was smiling again. I whispered, "We did it, Dad." In our own way. No applause followed, no fanfare. Just the sound of snow falling against the windowpane, soft and steady. Across the lake, I could see people walking their dogs, their coats bundled tight, their breath visible in the cold. They looked content, maybe even free. I envied their simplicity, then realized I had finally earned my own. The phone on my desk buzzed once. I didn't need to check to know who it was. Some doors didn't need reopening to know they were closed. I turned the ringer off. Peace isn't a prize someone gives you. It's a place you build with what's left after the noise fades. I picked up my tea, still warm, and took a slow sip. I wasn't rebuilt. I didn't need to be. I had simply remembered myself. And that, quietly and completely, was enough. Sometimes, closure doesn't come with an apology. It comes with silence that finally feels safe, because you stopped waiting to be chosen, and started choosing yourself. What about you? Have you ever walked away not to win but to remember who you were before they forgot? If this story stayed with you, subscribe. More truths are coming. Quietly. Powerfully. Just like this.